5,000 years ago, entire families were buried together in stone tombs across Sweden. Generation after generation, grandparents beside grandchildren, parents beside infants. For 200 years, they used the same tombs. Then suddenly, everyone stopped. No more burials. No more farmers. The population simply vanished. For centuries, nobody knew why. Was it war, famine, a sudden climate shift? Archaeologists debated for decades without an answer. Every theory had evidence for it. None had evidence conclusive enough to settle the debate. The evidence pointed in every direction and none. Then, in 2024, scientists extracted DNA from the teeth of 108 people buried in these tombs, and they found the killer, a bacterium invisible to the naked eye, lurking in the teeth of the dead for 5 millennia. It was plague, the oldest widespread plague ever documented in human history. Not a handful of isolated cases, a disease that returned again and again over 120 years. 3 separate waves of infection, each one cutting through the same community. This is Falbygden, a region in southwestern Sweden with more than 250 ancient passage graves. Some of these tombs have chambers more than 16 meters long and tall enough to stand in. Most were built between 3300 and 3100 BCE. Building these monuments required enormous communal labor. These were communities with surplus, organization, and ambition. At the peak of the Neolithic era, this was one of the most organized societies in Northern Europe. These were not random graves. These were family vaults used for generations. At the Rewritten Past grave, an estimated 78 people were buried within a 200-year span. Researchers from the University of Gothenburg and the University of Copenhagen collected teeth and bone samples. They sequenced DNA from 108 individuals across 9 burial sites, 62 males, 45 females, 1 undetermined. The team targeted the petrous bone inside each skull, the densest bone in the human body. The density of the petrous bone protects DNA from degradation for thousands of years. 174 teeth and bones were sampled. 108 yielded usable DNA. Each sample went through a rigorous extraction and sequencing pipeline designed specifically for degraded ancient material. The level of preservation in these 5,000-year-old teeth was remarkably high. Even degraded fragments could be sequenced and assembled into usable genomes. Damage patterns in the DNA confirmed its age. These sequences were genuinely ancient, not modern contamination. And when they scanned for pathogen DNA, they found Yersinia pestis. The bacterium that causes plague, Yersinia pestis, found in teeth 5,000 years old. The same organism that would later cause the Black Death. But this was its ancestor, older and stranger. The Neolithic strains sat near the very base of the plague family tree, among the earliest forms ever to infect humans, separated from the Black Death by 3,000 years of evolution. The bacterium that killed these Swedish farmers was the great-great ancestor of the medieval pandemic. Plague DNA only appears in teeth if the person had an active bloodstream infection at the moment of death. 18 of the 108 individuals, 17%, were infected when they died. Not 1 in 100, not 1 in 50, 1 in 6. Those are only the ones infected at the exact moment of death. The true rate was certainly higher. 1 in 6 people in these tombs died with plague in their blood. But the team didn't stop at identifying the disease. They reconstructed the family. 38 people from the Falbygden tombs were blood relatives spanning 6 generations: parents, children, grandchildren. great-grandchildren, all buried in the same stone chambers where their ancestors rested before them. The family pedigree that emerged from the DNA is one of the most detailed ever reconstructed from the ancient world. The DNA revealed that 4 men had children with multiple women, but no women had children with more than 1 man. This was a patrilineal society. Men stayed. Women married in from outside. And they were farmers, part of a tradition that had brought agriculture to Scandinavia from the south. Genetically, they carried roughly 80% Anatolian farmer ancestry and 20% Western European hunter-gatherer ancestry. These were the descendants of the people who brought farming to Northern Europe. They made funnel beaker pottery. They raised cattle and pigs. They grew wheat and barley. For more than 1,000 years, their farming culture defined Scandinavia. They built permanent settlements. They cleared forests for farmland. They created a landscape that still defines the region today. Some of the field boundaries they established 5,000 years ago are still visible in the landscape. They traded across distances. They built monuments that still stand today, and they were about to be erased. The plague hit this community in 3 distinct waves over 120 years. The researchers reconstructed 4 complete plague genomes from the teeth of the dead. The first 2 waves were small, limited infections, a handful of victims in each. But the 3rd wave was different. It carried new mutations, changes that may have made it more transmissible or more lethal. The genome suggested this strain could spread directly between people without an intermediate host. The final strain hit around 2900 BCE. It cut through entire generations. In one family branch, nearly everyone across 2 consecutive generations died with active plague infections. 32% of the related individuals carried plague DNA, nearly 1 in 3. But what kind of plague was this? Not the Black Death, something older, something different. This strain lacked the mutations that allowed the medieval Black Death to spread through flea bites. Without the flea adaptation, this plague probably spread person to person, through breath or contact. But the Neolithic strain had something else. Virulence factors never seen before in Yersinia pestis. Molecular tools inherited from its ancestor, Yersinia pseudotuberculosis. Tools that helped the bacteria colonize human cells. Whether these factors made the disease more deadly or less deadly is still unknown. The researchers cautioned that identifying plague DNA in teeth proves infection, not necessarily cause of death. These people could have been weakened by famine first. Plague may have been the final blow, but plague is only part of the story. This society was already under pressure before the disease arrived. Around the same time, the plague was spreading. A new population was moving into Europe from the east, the Yamnaya. Herders from the Pontic steppe who would transform the entire genetic landscape of Europe. The DNA from the Swedish tombs shows no trace of steppe ancestry. These farmers were genetically distinct from the Yamnaya. After the Neolithic decline, the Yamnaya filled the void. Their descendants are the closest genetic ancestors of present-day Scandinavians. The farmers who built the megaliths were almost entirely replaced. A new language, new burial customs, new genetic lineage. Instead of communal stone tombs, the newcomers buried individuals in single graves with personal weapons. The Stone Age was over. The Bronze Age had arrived with a genetically different population. Modern Scandinavians carry only trace amounts of Neolithic farmer DNA. The replacement was nearly total, not conquered. They were already gone when the steppe people arrived. The plague may have cleared the way, but not all researchers agree that plague alone explains the collapse. The Neolithic decline was widespread across Northern Europe. Sweden is only one data point. Plague was prevalent here. But can one region's data explain a continent-wide collapse? Other megalithic sites have shown sporadic plague cases, but none studied with this resolution. Climate change may have played a role. Agricultural exhaustion, soil depletion, temperature records from ice cores and tree rings suggest a cooling period during the decline. A population already stressed by declining harvests would have been far more vulnerable to epidemic disease. Pollen records show farmland reverting to forest across Scandinavia during the decline. Fields abandoned and reclaimed by nature. The population drop was real and dramatic. The question is whether plague was the primary driver or just one factor among many. Frederick Searsholm suggested they may be seeing only the start of the final outbreak. After the third plague wave, the burials stopped entirely. The community simply ceased to function, and the tombs themselves tell another part of the story. The way people were buried in these graves reveals the social structure of a vanished world. DNA showed that different family branches were buried in different sections of the same tomb. One group in the north end, another in the south, separated by kinship, even in death. These were people who knew exactly who belonged where, who kept track of lineage across generations. All the men shared closely related Y chromosome lineages. The tombs were inherited through the male line. Women married in from other communities. Men stayed and were buried where their grandfathers were buried, and when plague swept through, it killed men and women alike. Lineage holders and newcomers, elders and children. The infection showed no preference. Each new body in the tomb was another family member lost to the same invisible enemy. The disease didn't care about kinship or status. It took everyone. The survivors kept burying the dead according to custom, placing them with the ancestors who came before, maintaining the ritual even as the community crumbled, until one day, even that ritual could no longer be sustained. The tomb entrances filled with debris. Grass grew over the capstones. The community that built them was gone. What makes this study exceptional is the resolution. Published in Nature in July 2024, the study combined techniques that would have been impossible even 5 years earlier. Deep shotgun sequencing, population scale, ancient genomics, variant graph-based pangenomics, 108 ancient genomes from a single region. Family trees reconstructed across 6 generations. Pathogen genomes reconstructed from 5,000-year-old teeth. 4 complete plague genomes reconstructed base by base from fragments in ancient dental pulp. And 3 separate epidemic events traced within a single community across 120 years. This is what ancient DNA can do now. Not just identify a disease, but watch it evolve and spread through a real community in real time. 5,000 years later, we can see plague move through a family, generation by generation. The people who built these tombs never knew what was killing them. They had no concept of bacteria, no word for pandemic. They may have turned to ritual, to offerings, to spiritual explanations for the dying, but nothing they tried could stop a bacterium they could not see and did not understand. And they kept burying their dead in the same stone chambers until there was no one left to bury. If you want to understand how DNA is solving the oldest cold cases in history, subscribe, because every ancient tooth in every museum archive could hold the evidence of an unknown epidemic because the killer was inside the tomb the whole time. It just took 5,000 years to find it. The bones remembered what history forgot, and the plague that killed a civilization left its signature in a handful of teeth. 5,000 years, one tooth, one answer.